Once again, it's time for me to reveal my top 25 wines of the year. I've tasted more than 3,000 wines this past year, and these are definitely the best of the best. Unlike some other top lists that you'll see, these are not new releases. Rather, these are just my favorite wines, regardless of vintage. So many of these wines will be at their peak and have substantial age on them. It's going to take me a while to get through all 25 of these wines, so I'm going to do this top 25 in two parts. In today's video, I'll start with number 25 and work my way down to number 11. Of course, I'm also interested in hearing from you. So if you have any favorite wines that you've enjoyed during the past year, please let us know in the comments below. Back in 1836, George Yount planted some of the very first grapevines in Napa Valley near what is now aptly named Yountville. 145 years later, Christian Moix purchased this historic vineyard, which is called Napanook. At the time, Christian Moix was managing some of his family's famous properties in Bordeaux. Since acquiring Napanook, Christian Moix's Napa winery, which is called WINES, has gone on to become one of the more prestigious producers in all of Napa Valley by applying the same centuries-old winemaking techniques in the vineyard and in the winery that they've used successfully in Bordeaux. WINES is an extremely age-worthy wine. With substantial bottle age, it's also very difficult to distinguish it from Bordeaux in a blind tasting. Coming in at number 25 on my top 25 list is the 1997 WINES. This wine is a blend that consists of around 86% Cabernet Sauvignon, 9% Cabernet Franc, and a little bit less than 5% Merlot. This wine was intensely concentrated, yet elegant, and it was well balanced with ample acidity and a long, complex finish. While I have a slight preference for vintages like 1992 and 1994, this 1997 was definitely a very memorable wine. One of the most exciting Italian wine events for me this year was a distributor tasting that was hosted by Vinifera. They have a tremendous portfolio, and during this event they generously opened a number of top labels, including a number of wines with substantial age on them. Within this tasting, one of the absolute highlights was undoubtedly a flight of Barolo from Giuseppe Rinaldi, who is undoubtedly one of the most respected traditional producers in all of Barolo. While I enjoyed all three wines that I tasted from Giuseppe Rinaldi in this flight, my favorite of the trio was the 2013 Giuseppe Rinaldi Tretine Barolo. Tretine means three vats, and this wine is aptly named because it comes from a blend of fruit from three different vineyards, including Canubi, Rivera, and Lacoste. 2013 is certainly an extremely strong vintage for Barolo, and this is also a special vintage for this producer because it was one of the very last vintages that was fully overseen by Giuseppe Rinaldi himself before his unfortunate passing in 2018. So the 2013 Giuseppe Rinaldi Tretine Barolo is certainly well deserving of its spot as the number 24 wine on this year's top 25 list. This wine was classic Barolo in every sense of the word. It featured flavors and aromas of cherry, orange peel, licorice, rose petal, and mixed spice. It was a mineral-driven wine with impressive purity of fruit. While this wine is certainly extremely youthful and has decades of life ahead of it, it was a real treat to get a chance to evaluate it at this stage. In the early 1900s, a visionary champagne enthusiast had a bold idea to create champagne using only Chardonnay grapes, rather than the traditional blend of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier. So in 1905, Eugène-Émile Salon crafted the first bottle of Salon for his personal enjoyment. Salon's wines quickly gained recognition for their elegance, and in 1921, Salon was first established as a champagne house, so that this extraordinary Blanc de Blanc champagne could be distributed for a wider audience. In my view, Salon sets the standard for rarity and excellence in champagne. It's only produced in remarkable vintages, and in fact, they've only produced around 40 vintages since 1921. When it is produced, they only make around 50 to 60,000 bottles of it. Salon comes exclusively from 100% Chardonnay from the legendary La Mesnil-sur-Oger, and it spends an impressive 10 years on the lees before it is released. As such, CELLAR can develop unparalleled depth and complexity. So it's no surprise that the 1985 CELLAR comes in at number 23 in my top 25 wines for 2025. This was a champagne that demanded your full attention. Decades of bottle age added richness and complexity. This wine featured a symphony of flavors and aromas, including citrus, dried orchard fruit, hazelnut, honey, brioche, and a chalky minerality. This wine had an extremely long finish. A real treat to taste this one. While it's not classified like its left bank counterparts, Petrus is unanimously regarded as one of the world's best wines, thanks in large part due to its remarkable terroir and meticulous winemaking. The Petrus estate spans just 11.5 hectares, and it's located on a unique plateau with blue clay. These soils are ideally suited to the production of world-class Merlot, and Petrus is 100% Merlot. This Merlot is picked at the peak of ripeness, and there's a strict selection implemented, and only the best fruit is included in this iconic wine. What makes Petrus so special is its capacity to balance immense power with finesse and elegance. Younger vintages showcase opulent fruit and velvety texture, while older vintages reveal incredible complexity in layer after layer of secondary and tertiary notes. Earlier this year, we had a chance to taste the 1978 Petrus. While this is not the best vintage for Petrus, it shows that even in challenging vintages, Petrus is capable of producing a memorable wine. So the 1978 Petrus finished at number 22 in my top 25 wines of 2025. This wine opened in the glass, and it still had plenty of life left. This was a mineral-driven wine with flavors and aromas that included dark fruit, leather, cedar, black truffle, and much more. This wine was extremely well balanced and had a long lingering finish. We enjoyed this wine in the glass over a couple hours, and it did not fall off at all. So it's definitely a very resilient wine and still showing quite well. Now we'll go from Pomerol to Bordeaux's left bank, and more specifically, Saint-Estèphe. Côte-d'Estournel is located close to Château Lafite and the Pauillac border. Côte-d'Estournel is a second growth in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux. Côte means hill of pebbles, and this winery is aptly named as this is a perfect description for its vineyards. Côte-d'Estournel is also located fairly close to the ocean, and it tends to be a little bit cooler in this area, so it's definitely one of the last producers to harvest in Bordeaux each vintage. Coming in at number 21 in my top 25 wines for 2025 is the 1982 Côte-d'Estournel. We enjoyed this bottle a few weeks ago, and I was extremely impressed with how well it was showing. We opened it and enjoyed it on a pop and pour, so we didn't bother decanting it at all. This wine is fully mature, and it's very much still in its peak drinking window. From this wine you can expect cedar-infused blackcurrant, cigar, graphite, earth, mixed herbs, and spice. There's also a very long, elegant finish. Massetto is produced from fruit from a 7-hectare vineyard in Tuscany's Bolgheri region that's located near the coastal town of Castagneto Carducci. The vineyard's unique soils, microclimate, and proximity to the Tyrrhenian Sea all help to shape its unique personality. Like Petrus, Massetto is 100% Merlot. It's always a rare treat for me to enjoy Massetto, so coming in at number 20 in this year's top 25 wines of 2025 is the 2002 Massetto. While this is not the strongest vintage for Massetto, the terroir here is so remarkable and impressive that it's capable of making an extremely memorable wine even in challenging vintages like this one. Even after more than 2 decades, this wine was incredibly youthful, fresh, and vibrant, and kept evolving in the glass over the course of the evening. This wine completely enveloped my palate with layer after layer of flavors that included dark fruit, forest floor, tobacco, and mixed spice. There was ample acidity, silky tannins, and a very long finish. Back in 1995, Pulp Fiction was a cultural phenomenon. Coolio's Gangsta Paradise was topping the Billboard Top 100, and the grapes for the outstanding 1995 Tempos Vega Sicilia Unico Ribera del Duero were harvested. It's always a treat to taste Vega Sicilia's Unico, especially with substantial bottle age. While this wine was initially reticent, it came to life after about 90 minutes in the decanter. This wine is a blend that consists of 85% Tinto Fino, or Tempranillo, and 15% Cabernet Sauvignon. This wine featured deep dark fruit notes intertwined with smoke, leather, earth, forest floor, tobacco, and much more. It was extraordinarily complex. This was a wine that we chose to celebrate a good friend's birthday, and we enjoyed it with Jamon Iberico. Birthday celebrations really don't get much better than that. So this wine is extremely deserving of its place as the number 19 wine in my top 25 wines of 2025. It would be a bit boring if all I did was include my top 25 highest rated wines in this video. So for that reason, I try to include an interesting and diverse selection of wines, including some of the most memorable wines that I've had this year. And what could be more memorable than tasting a first growth Bordeaux from the legendary 1945 vintage, which was the same year that the world was celebrating the end of World War II. So coming in at number 18 in my top 25 wines of 2025 is the 1945 Chateau Lafite. This is a wine where our tasting group all chipped in to be able to try this special bottle. The aromatics for this wine were absolutely mesmerizing. In fact, I kept nosing the glass long after my tasting pour was finished. This wine definitely had a red fruit profile with red currant, cranberry, and cherries. To accompany the fruit, there were tertiary aromatics that included forest floor, earth, graphite, and cedar. While this wine is certainly past peak, it was not a mere novelty, and it definitely still did have some life left on it. It did fade after about 45 minutes to an hour, however, so definitely drink them if you have them. Frederick Dard once said, "I do not consider Yquem to be a wine, because there are an infinite number of wines as such. I prefer the word nectar, the drink of the gods." What makes Chateau d'Yquem so pricey? Well, it takes the fruit from an entire grapevine to make just a single glass of Chateau d'Yquem. The d'Yquem estate combines the ideal terroir from producing botrytis wines with meticulous winemaking. The grapes are painstakingly harvested, berry by berry, by teams of trained pickers who must be capable of distinguishing between noble rot and undesirable gray or black rot, and who only harvest a grape after it reaches perfect ripeness. This pursuit of perfection can take 10 to 12 passes through the vineyard and span 6 to 8 weeks. Following fermentation, Chateau d'Yquem is aged for a remarkable 30 months in 100% new oak barrels. While still relatively young, the 2009 Chateau d'Yquem was already mind-blowingly good. For that reason, it comes in at number 17 in my top 25 wines of 2025. Descriptors for this wine are almost too numerous to mention, so I won't attempt that here. And descriptors don't really do this wine justice. You simply have to experience it for yourself. But in France, they say that on the palate, this wine spreads like a peacock's tail. And that's a perfect description for it. Because once you get even a small sip on your palate, it just continues to expand with a crazy long finish that lasts close to a minute. Vieux Chateau Certain is a fantastic Bordeaux producer that's located on the Pomerol Plateau, quite close to Pétrus. Vieux Chateau Certain has been making progressively better wines and is at the top of its game. Its wines are absolutely stunning, and they offer extreme relative value compared to some of the other top expressions of Pomerol. So earlier this year, our tasting group got together, and we acquired 7 of the very best vintages of Vieux Chateau Certain from 1982 to 2015, and we sat down for a proper vertical tasting. Fortunately, all the bottles were sound, and none of them were flawed. To my surprise, the 1982 vintage was my least favorite. While the 2015 was certainly highly regarded, that wine did not show particularly well this night either. My 3 favorites were the 1998, 2000, and 2009. But if I had to score these wines, I would give my highest marks for the 2009 vintage, which comes in at number 16 in my top 25 wines of 2025. If you've ever wondered what it's like to try a wine that's accurately described as being sexy and sensual, this is absolutely it. This wine showed much like the younger vintages of Pétrus that I discussed earlier. Specifically, the fruit was incredibly opulent and vibrant. There was pronounced aromatic intensity, and the finish just went on forever. At this stage in its life, it's still extremely young and primary. This is definitely a potentially legendary vintage of Vieux Chateau Certain in the making, so I would definitely not hesitate to add this wine to your collection if you get a chance to do so. First crafted as an experimental wine back in 1951, Penfolds Grange has gone on to become one of the world's most coveted collectible wines. While it's dominant in Shiraz, most vintages also include a touch of Cabernet Sauvignon as well, which adds further depth and complexity. The only problem with Penfolds Grange is that, like Vega Sicilia's Unico, it can be extremely difficult to taste this wine at peak because it's so incredibly age-worthy. For that reason, I've often wondered when the best time to enjoy Penfolds Grange is. After recent tasting, it turns out that I would put that time at 40 years. We recently conducted a special vertical tasting of Penfolds Grange that included standout vintages like 1971, 1976, 1980, and 1986. This quartet of vintages includes 3 different vintages that many consider to be among the greatest vintages of Penfolds Grange ever produced. Our tasting certainly confirmed that. The 1976 and the 1986 were certainly 2 of my favorites. There was another vintage that was my absolute favorite of that night, but I'll discuss that one later in my top 25 wines of 2025. But for now, the 1986 vintage comes in at number 15 in my top 25 wines of 2025. This wine was absolutely remarkable. In fact, it almost seems to be aging in reverse like Benjamin Button. It's still incredibly youthful, and I'm still not sure that it's even reached its peak yet. This wine was intensely concentrated, with a dark fruit profile, and it had flavors and aromas that also included meat notes, smoke, and mixed spice. Really an extraordinary wine, and I went back and forth between this wine and one other vintage as to which of them was my favorite, but ultimately decided that this was my second favorite of the night. While I've mentioned a sparkling wine so far, I haven't yet discussed any white wines. That's going to change with my selection for number 14 in my top 25 wines of 2025, namely the 2011 Clos Saint-Hune. This is a wine that's extremely rare and difficult to track down, particularly for those of us who live in the United States. Fortunately, this is a bottle that I purchased a number of years ago during a trip to France at much lower prices than those for which it sells currently. This is a wine from iconic Alsace producer Trimbach, and the fruit for this wine comes from a tiny 1.6 hectare parcel. This historic wine is only released after years of extended aging at the winery, and it's always a special treat to taste this wine. This wine is a Riesling, and it's bone dry. It's layered with richness, tension, and precision. This is a mineral-driven wine with flavors and aromas that included mixed citrus, peach, crushed slate, and hints of petrol. This wine had laser-sharp acidity and an incredibly long finish. Along with G-Max from Keller, this is absolutely one of my favorite Rieslings in the world. In the heart of Meursault, Domaine Rouleau has redefined what this iconic village stands for. Once synonymous with rich buttery whites, Meursault now shines with wines that feature precision, purity, and minerality, thanks in no small part to Jean-Marc Rouleau's visionary leadership. Since taking over the family domain back in the late 1980s, Jean-Marc Rouleau has raised the bar for white Burgundy. His careful vineyard practices, minimal use of new oak, and unwavering commitment to expressing terroir have made Domaine Rouleau a legend in the world of wine. As soon as I took my first sip of the 2015 Domaine Rouleau Pont Rousseau Premier Cru Meursault, I knew that it would make my top 25 wines for this year. The only question is how highly I would rate it. The answer is number 13. This wine featured a sensory journey in every sip. There was lemon, green apple, and white peach that were complemented by crushed almonds, white flowers, and chamomile. There was also the telltale flintiness and smoky characteristic that you would expect. For decades, the fruit from the J.J. Cohn estate was a secret weapon in Napa Valley blends such as Inglenook, Opus One, and Joseph Phelps Insignia. But in 2003, Brett Lopez, who is J.J. Cohn's grandson, and co-founder Mimi de Blasio assembled a dream team, including winemaker Celia Welch, and began to use some of this fruit for a special wine that they called Scarecrow. Located in the Rutherford AVA, the J.J. Cohn estate has some of the oldest Cabernet Sauvignon vines in all of Napa Valley. These vines were planted way back in 1945, and while they make extremely low quantities of fruit, the fruit that they do produce makes extremely complex wines. Brett Lopez affectionately refers to these vines as the old men, and they tower over the estate much like sentinels. In fact, they're more like trees than grapevines. What happens when you combine the special fruit from these historic vines with one of the strongest recent vintages in Napa Valley? Well, you get a wine that comes in at number 12 in my top 25 wines of 2025, namely the 2013 Scarecrow. This wine is an absolute powerhouse, albeit an elegant one, with flavors and aromas that included blackberry, blackcurrant, and black cherry, along with graphite, tobacco, and mixed spice. This wine is just entering its prime and has a long life ahead of it. If you get a chance to try this wine, I definitely would not turn it down. Many of the wines that are featured in my top 25 wines each year come from these big nights where we have group wine tastings. In addition to the wines that are the main event, oftentimes we'll open some special wines both before and after the main event. One of those wines comes in at number 11 in my top 25 wines of 2025. This is a wine that we tasted after the Vieux Chateau Certain tasting discussed earlier, namely the 1989 Chateau Margaux. Despite the fact that this wine was not that much older than the 1982 Vieux Chateau Certain, it has lots more life left, and it is unquestionably at its peak. It was extraordinarily elegant. There were haunting aromatics that included dried violets, black currant, and graphite. On the palate, this wine walked a tightrope between grace and gravitas. There were silky tannins, vibrant acidity, and an extraordinarily long, complex finish. An absolutely magical wine. This special wine is just the latest reminder of why Chateau Margaux is one of my all-time favorite producers. Earlier this year, I was fortunate to be able to visit this iconic estate, and I published a video in which I shared much of what I learned. If you'd like to come with me on that visit, please be sure to check out this video that's linked above.